you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Lina Tamim, and these are today's top stories. The United Nations-backed Special Tribunal for Lebanon will begin tomorrow on the outskirts of The Hague in the Netherlands. President Michel Sleiman holds talks on the government formation efforts with Prime Minister-designate Tamam Slam and head of the Phalange Party, Amin Jmail. Donors meeting in Kuwait pledged nearly $1.3 billion in humanitarian aid for the victims of the Syrian war. The trial of the Hezbollah members and supporters suspected of being behind the assassination of the former Lebanese Prime Minister, Rafiq Hariri, will finally start this week, 9 years after his murder. The suicide truck bomb car attack that killed Hariri and 22 others on February 14th of 2005 was one of the most dramatic top-level assassinations in the Middle East and immediately caused an increase in huge sectarian divisions. The United Nations-backed Special Tribunal for Lebanon will begin tomorrow on the outskirts of The Hague in the Netherlands. However, the 5 key suspects behind the attack will be tried in absentia, as they are still yet to be arrested. They include 4 Hezbollah members indicted in 2011 with plotting the attack and another supporter charged last year. The trial will be held under a hybrid system of international and Lebanese laws. Hezbollah has condemned the trial as a conspiracy by its arch-enemies, the U.S. and Israel. It also denies any involvement in Hariri's assassination. Despite widespread criticism of the trial, some inside Lebanon are optimistic that justice will prevail. Former Justice Minister Ibrahim Najjar is positive Lebanon will finally discover the truth.
We are confident that the Special Tribunal for Lebanon will conduct these proceedings and the procedure in a very fair way in order to let the Lebanese at last find out the truth. I think that for the first time since 1943, Lebanon is about now to discover the truth within an independent tribunal. Yes, there is a fear. At least some witnesses have declared that they fear to appear before the court and to say everything they have in mind or in their knowledge. I think that there is a real fear because when you kill a witness, the truth is affected. That's why I think that there are special precautions, special undertakings that have been decided by the tribunal in order to protect them.
President Michel Sleiman stresses Lebanon's commitment to international resolutions while highlighting the importance of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon in ending impunity in the country. He says the tribunal is a step towards holding criminals accountable for their actions. Moreover, he stressed that the STL will also serve as a deterrent to others from committing future crimes. Earlier today, Sleiman held talks on the government formation efforts with Prime Minister-designate Tamam Slam, head of the Phalange Party Amin Jmail, and Social Affairs Minister Wael Abu Faour. Labor Minister Salim Jreisati has reassured contract electricity workers that the service provider company will go back on its decision to lay off tens of part-time employees. Speaking to reporters after his meeting with a delegation from KVA, Jreisati said KVA will refrain from firing any of the workers before consulting with the Labor Ministry a month in advance, and the contract workers can now return to their jobs as usual. Jreisati also thanks KVA, an electric distribution service provider contracting with Électricité du Liban, for being open and agreeing to return the sacked contract employees. KVA sacked 62 workers earlier this month after the company terminated their contracts, prompting the sacked employees to block a vital Beirut highway on Tuesday, paralyzing traffic around the capital. Donors have gathered in Kuwait to raise money for 13 million Syrians affected by the war after the United Nations made a record appeal for $6.5 billion. Kuwait's Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Sabah opened the conference with a $500 million pledge, and the U.S. promised $380 million, but warned that international efforts to ease the suffering of Syrians will fail if President Bashar al-Assad refuses to let humanitarian assistance reach the people who need it. U.S. Secretary of State has also promised $76 million to Lebanon to help it cope with the rising number of Syrian refugees. Delegates from 69 nations and 24 international organizations have attended today's summit, chaired by the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. But Britain's former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, who is the UN's envoy for education, says the schooling of Syria's children was as important as delivering food and medicine to the refugees. The UK has announced a £4 million aid to support education and for Lebanese and the Syrian children.
One of the things the UK is determined to do is to make sure that children in Lebanon, whether Syrian refugee children, many of whom are behind me, or Lebanese children in public schools, have the school books that they need to be able to study effectively. So today we're announcing up to £4 million of UK support to make sure that 300,000 children in the Lebanese school system get books in core subjects, maths, science, languages, literature, to make sure that they'll be able to get through school. That will include books for 80,000 Syrian refugee children, but 240,000 Lebanese children as well. So far, the UK government's provided over £500 million of support for the overall Syria refugee crisis. £100 million of that has directly supported Lebanon in the challenges it's facing in hosting so many refugees, over 800,000 now. It's putting a huge strain on local communities in Lebanon, and the UK is determined to work with the Lebanese government, particularly in education, to make sure that we can help Lebanon cope with this huge number of refugees. We're also working with refugees directly to make sure that they've got the shelter and the food and the medical attention that they need, having left their own country.
Prime Minister Najib Mikati has called for international support to establish a safe haven inside Syria, where refugees can take shelter from the fighting between government troops and rebels. Mikati told the donor states that what is happening in Syria has impacted Lebanon, where investment has declined and the service sector has been negatively affected. He also stressed that Lebanon was in dire need for greater assistance to help the country cope with the nearly 1 million Syrian refugees. At the political level, Mikati urged the Arab and international communities to distance Lebanon from regional conflicts. Following the conference, Mikati held separate meetings with Kuwait's Emir, UN Chief Ban Ki-moon, and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. The national news agency says Kerry informed Mikati that the U.S. will continue its cooperation and support for the country and for the Lebanese army. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and Iran's visiting Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif have held talks about next week's United Nations conference aimed at trying to resolve the 3-year-old deadly conflict. State television says Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif expressed Tehran's support for Assad's government to make the conference successful. The UN, which is hosting the talks on January 22nd in Montreux, Switzerland, has not yet invited Iran to attend, although a final decision has yet to be made. And coming up next, Egyptians vote to decide on the country's new referendum. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Egyptians queued for the second day in front of polling booths to decide on the country's new referendum as polarization plays out on the streets between celebrating charter supporters and protesting opponents. About 53 million Egyptians are eligible to vote for the new constitution, the result of which could see the defense minister, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, launch a presidential bid. Anti-coup protesters who blamed Sisi for the removal of Mohamed Morsi from the presidency in July rallied in the capital of Cairo, Al-Sharqiyya in the north of Egypt, and Fayoum al-Delga in the south. Many seemed undeterred by Tuesday's sporadic clashes, which left at least 11 people dead, although there was a heavy security presence outside several polling stations in Alexandria and Cairo. Meanwhile, local television channels showed footage of jubilant groups of voters dancing and celebrating as they carried posters of Sisi. And now for news around the world in brief. Multiple explosions in Iraq have killed at least 58 people and wounded a further 94. This is according to police and medical officials. A suicide bomber targeted a funeral in the village of Buhriz near the northern town of Bakuba, killing 18 people and injuring 23. In Baghdad, about half a dozen car bombs exploded, killing at least 16 people and wounding dozens more. Today's violence occurred amid a continuing standoff between Iraqi police, Sunni tribesmen and al-Qaeda-linked fighters in Anbar province for control of major cities. Jewish settlers are suspected of setting fire to a mosque's entrance in the occupied West Bank after last week's beating and detention of Israeli settlers by Palestinians. The perpetrators wrote "Arabs out" and "Revenge for blood spilled in Kusra" in Hebrew on the walls of the mosque in Deir Istiya village. Police say the attack was nationalistically motivated. Police searched teen pop star Justin Bieber's California home in a vandalism case linked to the Canadian singer and arrested a man at the house for drug possession. Detectives raided Bieber's home after the boyfriend singer was accused of pelting his neighbor's home with eggs on January 9th. Bieber, 19, was detained at his Calabasas home about 30 miles northwest of Los Angeles, while a dozen deputies searched for evidence. A Danish woman has alleged she was gang-raped in the Indian capital of New Delhi, the latest high-profile case of sexual assault against women in the country. Reports say the 51-year-old woman was in New Delhi for a week and had been visiting touristy sites in Agra and later the National Museum in the capital. Yesterday evening, she had lost her way on the way to her hotel in Paharganj, a crowded locality in New Delhi where many foreigners stay in affordable lodgings. She was later accosted by a group of men who then assaulted her. Police say the rapists were vagabonds and the tourist was assaulted and robbed of cash and valuables on her person. She was taken to the Danish embassy in Delhi and she had expressed her wish to return home after a medical examination. Delhi police have detained 6 suspects based on the complaint made by the woman. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. The United Nations-backed Special Tribunal for Lebanon will begin tomorrow on the outskirts of The Hague in the Netherlands. President Michel Sleiman holds talks on the government formation efforts with Prime Minister-designate Tamam Slam and head of the Phalange Party, Amin Lejmayed. And donors meeting in Kuwait pledged nearly $1.3 billion in humanitarian aid for victims of the Syrian war. Those are today's top stories from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice evening.